You know, everybody is sad sometimes. You should just like work out more. You should just get outside. And it's like, if you're dealing with like gender dysphoria, getting outside, getting ripped in the gym is not going to fix it, because you're like fundamentally struggling with the core issue of who you are. Like Gunter did a video on you, and I've seen some of your clips. I wanted to support a fellow. Is it a positive video on me? Is there a positive video? Chat, did we do it? Do we actually manage to get a positive video on us? Awesome progressive dude that does videos. So yes, you have a nice video. Let's go! Which one? What's it called? I don't see myself in the thumbnail. In the first half, having a chat versus Rev. This video has repeatedly shared. Oh. Which video was that? Harry Potter remake messed up big time. Oh, that's a new video.
So I want to give it a little preface before this. The way that I found, I guess, refound Rev Says Desu, I knew about them, but not like specifically. I just knew that he was kind of a weirdo. He's in a bit of a spat with this person named Yara VT. If you don't know Yara
That's
VT,
me.
by the way, let me shield her a little bit, because I just subscribed to her. If you're a big VTube person, which I'm not, but she seems pretty progressive and cool.
That's me.
You know, anti-trans groups won't divide the LGBTQ plus community. The real trans regret is not transitioning sooner. I mean, great shit, right? So if you're trans and you like VTubers, or you just support trans rights and like VTubers, perfect fit for you, right?
Let's go.
Yara VT herself is trans. She's working. I know I've seen a few posts about her working on her voice. You're doing great, Queen. Keep it up. They got into a bit of a spat on Twitter that. Because Nyara said, "Hey Rev, can a kid be transgender?" Rev replies, "All you're describing is a grooming victim. And since I answered your question, can you finally answer mine? Yara, can kids consent? Algorithm for determining the consent procedure for the treatment of young persons diagnosed with gender dysphoria as per Ray Imogen, 2020. I've never heard of this before this. So interesting and informative stuff here. Gender dysphoria diagnosed and treatment medically indicated."
That image was from like a study on it. Let me see if I can find the image. I think that was, yeah. That was the study. Consent for treatment of gender dysphoria in minors from 2021. If you're curious where the image comes from.
The Gillick Competent Child. The right of a child under 16 to consent to medical examination and treatment, including immunization, was decided by the House of Lords in Gillick versus West Norfolk and Wisbeck, AHA, 1986, or a mother of girls under 16 objected to the Department of Health advice that allowed doctors to give contraceptive advice and treatment to children without parental consent. Their lordships held that a child under 16 had the legal competence to consent to medical examination and treatment if they had sufficient maturity and intelligence to understand the nature and implications of the treatment. So, this might just be a Britmonger thing, I don't know, but I've never heard of Gillick competence before. I do like the standard, though, that there are certain age ranges in which certain children can consent to certain medical procedures.
Also, just FYI, because I'm German, I looked up for like European like age of consent for medical treatment, and there isn't a number. Without parental approval is 16 years. That is in Lithuania, Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Spain, and the United Kingdom. No fixed minimum age in Austria, Belgium, Czech Republic, Estonia, and Germany, Luxembourg, and Sweden. And it's always like so interesting that these people are like obsessed with age of consent, with like consent in general, but then they have like takes of, oh, intersex people need to be forced into gender reassignment surgeries, etc., because they are broken and need to be fixed. Then consent doesn't matter. It's just when it comes to like a child getting treated for gender dysphoria, not feeling comfortable in their own skin and wanting to get help, then consent is like a big issue. Oh, kids can't consent. That's why, you know, HRT and puberty blockers, etc. is like a bad thing. But when it comes to like intersex children, gender reassignment surgery, then it's like, oh, the doctors, they know better. Oh, if it's like gender ambiguous genitalia, if the phenotypical sex characteristics are ambiguous, then just flip a coin. Like when I had the talk with Okko about like trans stuff, and he mentioned John Money, I was like, it's so funny because like John Money would have been like, oh, you know, just flip a coin and whatever that kid has now as phenotypical sex characteristics, they are going to be just a normal girl or a normal boy. When in reality, it's like, well, you don't know the gender identity of that child, so you don't even know if you made the right call. So I think it's way more important that like intersex children also get like proper treatment once they can like consent to it. But I guess it doesn't fit into the box and the narrative of like transphobic people, and they're just like, oh, if you have XXY chromosomes, then you're just female. If your phenotypical sex characteristics are ambiguous, just remove the ones that are most underdeveloped and everything is just going to work out. And it's like, it's just not how it works. You know, it causes a lot of like distress. The other up thing is with like intersex children, if they did have like ambiguous genitalia and they were like forced into one role, they're being gaslit. They're being gaslit by their parents if their gender identity doesn't match their phenotypical sex characteristics. It's like, oh, you're going to grow out of that dysphoria. You're a girl and you have like a spike in like testosterone because your ovaries are actually producing testosterone. That's just how it is sometimes. So they're just being gaslit. And that is like insane. Good thing that the self-determination law in our country took care of those problems. Well, not really. It's also not really good for like non-binary people. And our conservative party already wants to get rid of it. Got it all 50-50 chance to be right. Yeah. And like, you have to understand that like cis people are just lucky. Cis people are lucky that their gender identity matches their biological sex. Everybody else, when that is not the case, is just unlucky. It's the same with like straight people are just lucky to be straight. They're lucky to grow up in an environment that is like catered towards them, and they don't have to like change who they are. They don't have to mask who they are. And I think that is also like the problem when it comes to like coming out. You know, Awesome sent me like a TikTok of someone talking about the biggest reason why gay people struggle with coming out. And it's just because like we grow up in an environment that teaches us that being gay is bad. So we start internalizing that hatred and we just don't want to come to terms with that. Okay, we are different. This is how we are. I think that like trans people struggle similarly, where it's just like, I don't want to be trans. I don't want to be different. I wish that one day I'm going to wake up and I'm just going to be like everyone else. But like you can't change your gender identity. When people say like, oh, I used to be different like 10 years ago as a kid, it's like, yeah, but like, is your gender identity different? Obviously going through puberty, etc. can like cause a little confusion in children because like you're going changes that are like different, but like, do they still align with your gender identity? And like, we don't have the luxury that the changes that are happening to our body align with our gender identity. And that's why like gender affirming care, especially for like minors, is so important. It's insane that like cis people have the audacity to like tell trans people how they should feel, how their dysphoria should be like. Imagine you drive every day to work with a car that is like just constantly breaking down and you constantly have to fix things. You have to wake up like 2 hours early just to like make sure that your car's running and everything is like working fine. And then someone with like a new car is just like coming along and it's like, oh yeah, everyone has like car troubles. Oh, you should just wake up sooner. Everyone has car troubles. It's not an excuse to be late for work. And it's like, you just think that like what you're experiencing is the norm, but it's actually not. It's the same with like having ADHD or like sleep problems, etc. You know, when your hormones are not properly balanced and you're like being menopausal or something, and then people come along and it's like, oh, you're just moody, you're just lazy, you should just be more motivated. Like invalidating your struggles and making it seem like what you're experiencing is actually the norm in order to just like brush off everything that you are dealing with. And I feel like a lot of cis parents do that to their trans children, where it's like, oh, when I was your age, I didn't know who I was too. When I was your age, I was actually struggling with my gender as well. When you have like a girl who experiences a lot of misogyny, etc., and sees how she's being treated and how the boys are being treated and wanting to escape like misogyny by wishing she was like born a boy, it's like that doesn't really mean that they are trans. It's just that like society is just teaching girls from a really young age that they are going to face more struggles than a lot of boys. So you don't take a child, you don't take a young girl to the pharmacy and give them HRT, etc. You have them work with experts and like figure that out. Because like, do you think that like, if I understand the situation, do you honestly think that like psychologists wouldn't look for that at first as well? If I can imagine a scenario where that is like the reason why you're questioning your gender identity, etc., do you really think that like the experts in the field wouldn't have thought of that? If you're homeless, just buy a house. Like, come on. It's like Elon Musk saying like, oh, homeless people are just being lazy. It's just an excuse in order to take from the rich. Have you just tried not being a mutant? X-Men 2 in 2003, making fun of this exact stance 22 years ago. Yeah, it's like, you know, if you're depressed, if you're struggling with depression and like everything is costing so much energy, you know, just like getting out of the bed is like costing so much energy, and people come along being like, oh, you're just lazy. You know, everybody is sad sometimes. You should just like work out more. You should just get outside. And it's like, if you're dealing with like gender dysphoria, getting outside, getting ripped in the gym is not going to fix it, because you're like fundamentally struggling with a core issue of who you are. And like the only thing that helps is like gender affirming care. And what that gender affirming care looks like is different from trans person to trans person. And it's also insane because like gender dysphoria isn't even like exclusively for like trans people, because like cis people experience gender dysphoria as well. That's why like 97% of gender affirming surgeries performed on minors are performed on cis boys with gynecomastia. And then it doesn't matter that they can't consent, because like boys obviously shouldn't experience breast growth because of an hormonal natural like imbalance. Then it doesn't matter that they can't consent. It only matters when it's like trans kids. And that's why people like Rev, etc. are calling me a groomer. That is like the only reason. And it's so insane because like what I'm saying literally just aligns with doctors, with experts in the medical field, with like pediatricians, what they are saying. I'm saying things that align with the guidelines for gender affirming care for trans healthcare. Also, kind of a big win. In Ohio, the courts have ruled that trans care is healthcare. Strikes down ban for trans youth. And the funny thing is, they used a ruling from Republicans to determine that trans healthcare is actually healthcare. It was in 2011 from the Republicans to prevent the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. No federal, state, or local law or rule shall prohibit the purchase or sale of healthcare or health insurance. No federal, state, or local law or rule shall impose a penalty or fine for the sale of or purchase of healthcare or health insurance. So like they used their law against them to rule in favor of trans healthcare, which is pretty good. And like, you know, what the alternative to gender affirming care for trans kids actually is just making the trans kid depressed, which is kind of the goal of like these anti-trans people, because they don't want trans people to exist. That's why they are trying so hard to just go after us, so we stop existing. It's just annoying that we have to fight in court to get access to the same treatment that cis kids, cis adults can just easily access. It's insane how difficult it is for us to get the same rights, or like for us to get the same privileges that cis people have, because they don't want it to be a right. They want to keep that privilege. They want to gatekeep access to gender affirming care for them. It's like, we don't want to be trans, but we can't help it. We're trans, you know, the same way that I can't help being left-handed. You can shove me into a concentration camp and force me to write with my right hand for the next decade, but like it will always be traumatic and awful for me, because it's not my natural dominant hand.
Here's the problem.
Little tangent.
With what Rev says Desu is doing. He is purposefully conflating medical consent with consent for sex. Because when we talk about consent and we talk about children not being able to give consent, the first thing that comes to mind is children cannot consent to sex, right? That's just the first thing that comes to mind. Obviously, children cannot consent to that until they're 18 years of age, arguably older. Now, the reason that this is often conflated is for transphobes, right? To say, oh, look, trans people and allies of trans people think that children can consent. Consent to what, motherfucker? As I said, to what? To go to school, to take antibiotics? What consent are you referring to? It's a very disgusting wordplay that they like to engage in. As he says here, I have asked you countless times whether or not you think kids can consent. You refuse to answer. As it turns out, kids can consent to medical treatment of certain types at certain ages, okay? Some people go by the Gillick competence.
You're so happy. Listen, I'm not used to people covering my stuff and being like positive, being on my side, you know? I'm not used to that. People literally want to start drama with me. People just want to be stupid. That's what I'm used to.
Physicians may commonly provide medical care to a mature minor without parental consent, particularly if the state allows a minor to consent to related healthcare services. So as I said, yes, sometimes a child can consent to treatment. If they're old enough, if they're mature enough, depending on the treatment type, yes, they can. They can, Rev. Okay? Not to sex, to medicine. But you're purposefully conflating those. Why? Interesting.
It's also kind of funny because Rev is a lolicon and he like justifies all that stuff.
If children couldn't consent to medical care at all and we treated it exactly the same as we treated sexual acts, we wouldn't even give vaccines to infants. That would be seen as abuse, okay? But we do give vaccines to infants because we're not a barbarian society. We're not IQ of 30, okay? Because vaccines for infants are good. Even if they can't consent to them, they're still good, okay?
We hate measles in this stream.
Anyway, this is all to preface the video, which has nothing to do with any of that, but I just wanted to give you guys a little idea of how I found out this person exists once again. He decides to talk about Severus Snape race swap rejected by Harry Potter fans.
Oh god. But yeah, I'm glad that, you know, people are just like catching on a little bit more on like who Rev is beyond his like anti-woke campaign that he's like pushing. Swap thing was also something my friend was crying about. Race swap rejected by Harry Potter fans. Promise. I feel like people have problems with Harry Potter because like J.K. Rowling. I don't think making Snape black is like the problem. Just plain racism. Yeah. Big shout out to the person in your chat saying that I'm cool. Maybe link the video in chat. I'm not going to watch any more of it. I was just interested in like that part of the video.